Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. This is a very special episode of Ramblings of a Geek. I actually have Loren Williams from PCs for People here with me to talk a little bit about security around data destruction and those kinds of things. And it's important for me to level set at the beginning of our conversation because my former MSP used PCs for People for quite a long time because they did a great job for us. And what they did was they would come in, they'd pick up all of our hardware that our clients wanted to get rid of, and they would just take it away and give us certificates of destruction and all of those things. It was a really cool thing. And they have a cool message and mission. We'll talk a little bit about that at the end of our conversation today. But Loren, it's great to have you on the call today. Tell us just a little bit about you, and we'll go ahead and get into our conversation.
It's great to be here, Adam. Thanks for having me today. And I've spent my whole career in lifecycle management of computer hardware, selling hardware, buying hardware, leasing hardware, and currently at PCs for People at a nonprofit electronics recycler of hardware.
Awesome. And today we're talking a little bit about the end point of the life cycle, although I'm sure we could talk about the whole life cycle, but the end point of the life cycle and trying to minimize the security risk of having unguarded data out there. And even if the data is encrypted at rest, I think it's still important that we make sure that we're doing the appropriate amount of destruction. So Loren, talk to me a little bit about some of the risks and concerns around data destruction. I know that's core to how you guys operate.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, we all in the IT community, I think we talk a lot about data breach and getting hacked and getting phished and losing our data while we're using it. But we often do not talk about what happens with the data when we're no longer using a piece of hardware. We get the shiny new hardware in, everybody loves it, it gets set up, it gets deployed, the old equipment gets taken out and maybe left in a corner or a closet or a warehouse or who knows where. And that's a huge data risk. Data is sitting there on equipment, not being monitored, not being watched, and that's a huge risk to organizations. So what I would say to MSPs as part of your life cycle management, include that end of life process and data destruction and disposal of hardware as one of the services that you offer.
So talk to me a little bit about kind of the normal kind of data destruction process or the equipment recycling process, because I think there's probably two sides of the coin, right? It's probably equipment recycling, which is a lot of what you guys do, but also the data components of it as well. If we were to take our old outmoded hardware to just a generic recycler, what typically happens there? Is there kind of a normal process that goes through, and how is it different than what you guys do?
So what I'm going to recommend is that if you're not handling data destruction internally yourself or your client's not handling it, that you make sure to work with a recycler or data destruction company that is NAID certified. And NAID stands for the National Association of Information Destruction. And maybe you want to get that certification yourself, though I'll tell you it costs about $5,000 for just the certification. Wow. And then a whole bunch more money to maintain compliancy, to train your staff, to get each staff member to pass certification, and then to update that every year. But if you don't want to get it yourself, look for a partner who is NAID compliant, because that means they've gone through a pretty rigorous process in terms of destroying the bits and bytes to HIPAA standard and Department of Defense standard, but also a rigorous process in terms of storing equipment, picking up equipment. If they offer on-site pickup, there's a NAID compliant process for picking up equipment, for locking the truck, for having employees who are background checked, for having equipment kept under camera footage when it returns to the warehouse and saving that camera footage for 90 days or longer. There's all kinds of details that are spelled out to be NAID compliant. And you're going to want to look for a partner. If you're not doing it yourself and you're not NAID compliant, look for a partner that is NAID compliant.
That's really interesting. I never thought about all the logistics of the whole sort of the chain of command kind of a thing. Whatever that looks like is it's just not a thing that I think many people think about, right? Because when you think about lifecycle management, as you said, it's kind of that new shiny stuff, and you get the new thing, you deploy it, you take the old stuff, you put it in a pile, and the client, and then that pile sits in the server room or under someone's desk or in the storage room at a client's office. And then sometime the client comes and says, "Hey, would you make this pile of junk go away?" And then the MSP takes it and they put it in the back of their car, and it gets a little bit of a tour of the city of the MSP. Tech remembers to take it out of the car. Then they bring it into the office, and I think to your point, there's a lot more consideration around the process that people should be thinking about, especially when it comes to any kind of data destruction. Now, of course, some industries, as you mentioned, are more sensitive to this than others. But boy, I certainly wouldn't want to have a bunch of HIPAA data floating around in the back of one of my tech's trunks for 5 or 6 weeks or something like that. Have you ever seen a situation where something was stolen out of someone's car or someone lost control of a laptop and so they were able to recover data from it?
I've heard of people losing hardware. I didn't find out what happened with the data later on, but we just eliminate all that in our process of PCs for people because we are NAID compliant and we follow those processes, and the truck is always locked and the warehouse is always locked and it's always under camera footage. But just imagine what could happen if data leaks that way.
And even if the data doesn't actually officially leak, if the data, if the person just steals the laptop out of the back of the technician's car and then formats it and just uses it themselves or pawns it or whatever, that breach of data security, depending on the industry, you have to, or you're supposed to report that anyway.
Yep.
And I think the cool part is that if you have a recycler that you know and you trust and you have a process for it, all of this gets easier, right? Just like anything with anything that we do is when you don't have a process, things are messy. And then you build a process and then you use the process and you kind of iterate and make the process a little bit better over time. And having a strong partner where you're not just taking the machines to your local big box store and say, here's some stuff, make it go away, where they actually partner with a company like yours, that makes a huge difference because it just makes all of that easy and not mysterious in the slightest. Do you help MSPs with kind of like them understanding the process and what they should expect? And like, what are some of those best practices, if you have any, that you would share with MSPs or frankly, just IT departments out there?
Sure. Basically, I think the best thing to do is as you're planning the next deployment, start planning the decommissioning. Start planning what are you going to do with the old equipment when you've taken it out, whether it's an MSP handling it for a client or the client's handling the hardware on their own. And tee it up so that you've got a place to take it, or have somebody come in and pick it up so it's not sitting around in the corners of the office or in the empty cubicles or even in the closet. Because there's always that risk that even an employee who sees there's old computers sitting around, my nephew's heading off to college next month. Nobody's going to miss if I take one laptop and give it to him. We have 200 of them and we're not even using them. And it walks out the door, and maybe that laptop doesn't really have that much monetary value. It's probably been depreciated over 3 years, but the value of the data that could be on there, or really the liability of the loss. So make that part of the lifecycle management plan. We're installing the new equipment on the 1st of the month. We want the old equipment out by the 30th of the month. Maybe we're going to keep it to have, in case the new equipment isn't working out right, we'll keep it for a few days or a couple of weeks, but
Sure.
make a plan. And don't push it to the back burner.
Yeah, I like that, and make that decommissioning, the official decommissioning, be part of that project, whether it's one machine or it's 20 machines, right? And coming off of the Windows 10 to Windows 11 stuff last year, I'm sure you guys got real busy, much like MSPs did, maybe like a month or two later, right? Where maybe you guys weren't quite so busy in September, October, but probably pretty busy in October, November, December, and maybe even into January. Is that something that you see when there's a big like industry changes happening, that you'd go through a big an uptick in the cycle in the process?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of organizations are just on their typical 3-year, 4-year, or 5-year process to refresh hardware. But certainly the change from Windows 10 to Windows 11 and the discontinuation of support for Windows 10, that put a lot of people on that cycle, and we got a lot of Windows 10 computers in as they were getting replaced.
So I want to talk about that for a minute, because you get a bunch of Windows 10 machines coming in. What do you guys do with those machines? They're now Windows 10, maybe not certified for Windows 11. What does PCs for People do with that? Because now I'm curious about that.
Sure. So first, we delete all the data. That's the most important thing. And by the way, I don't think I mentioned this. If we can't delete all the data, and this would be true of any NAID certified organization, if we can't delete all the data, we shred the hard drives. And part of that compliance actually specifies how small the shreds have to be. So just drilling a hard drive is not gonna cut it. We've got hard drive shredders that shred it. We always take care of all the data deletion. If the computer is a month old or 12 years old, we handle the data destruction. When it came to the Windows 10 computers, some could be upgraded to Windows 11 by adding the right amount of memory, but some just innately couldn't be upgraded. So computers like that, what we would do is strip as many parts as we could to reuse and upgrade other computers,
Okay.
and then responsibly recycle the other commodities that go into a computer. Part of our process, this has nothing to do with the information destruction aspect. Part of our process is that we're a zero landfill recycler. We repurpose as much as we can, as many computers as we can for low income households, but then nothing goes into landfills.
That's awesome. E-waste can be such a problem, and when not handled well, it gets, can be, catastrophic for the environment. So I certainly appreciate that about your organization. Let's get back to, for a minute, let's talk a little bit about some of the particularities around data destruction and those kind of things, because I think it's important to understand what a certificate of destruction is, what the MSP is responsible for, and those kind of things. So can you kind of walk me through what that looks like and what that should look like for an MSP or, frankly, regular IT department?
So it's always good to have a record of the fact that your data was destroyed. And that's something that PCs for People or any NAID certified organization should be able to offer, a certificate of data destruction. And that certificate will list every device, every computer by serial number, the serial number of the hard drive in that computer, and then in our case, will state whether the data was destroyed or the hard drive was, whether the data was deleted or the hard drive was physically destroyed, like I mentioned, shredded in our case. Or if we get just loose hard drives in, as we do from time to time, same thing. Those hard drives with their serial numbers will be on that certificate of data sanitization. And we've had organizations come back to us and say, we went through our annual audit, and the audit team wanted to find out what happened with our old computers and our old hard drives. We pulled out that certificate, handed it to them, pointed to that serial number. We were good to go.
Is holding on to that certificate of data destruction or sanitization something that MSP should hold on to for themselves or give to their clients, or what's the right process there? Is that something that they should hold on to, or?
We've had it go both ways when we work with MSPs. Sometimes the MSP is managing the process, and sometimes they'll introduce us right to their customer. We'll work more directly with their customer. And as long as it's made clear, I think, who's going to do it, and there's no reason both can't also. I mean, it's
Right.
electronic, doesn't take up much space.
Right, fair enough. So you mentioned earlier HIPAA and government contractors, and anything that's kind of in the security side of the world there. What other industries are particular about their data and data destruction?
Well, really, as you might guess, hospitals, healthcare, financial services. We work with a multitude of law firms. Of course, it's very, very important to them. But really, any can be a grocery store, because there's credit card numbers on
Sure.
the
PCI.
IT devices. There could be hundreds and thousands of credit card numbers. So really, any kind there could be, if you're a graphic designer, there could be your intellectual property of graphic designs you've made on your computer. There's really nobody who would want would want to take that risk that I can think of. Maybe like a publicly used kiosk or something where it's not really storing any data, or
Sure.
maybe if everything's on the cloud. But even when everything's on the cloud, there's probably login information on the client computer.
And even that might even be more risky than the raw data if they're able to extract out any kind of login information or password hashes or any of that kind of thing. I think that the name of the game here is that the more likely that there's any kind of regulation in there, whether it's HIPAA, PCI, CIS, CMMC, any of the acronyms probably that we use as an industry, probably means that that data needs to be securely destroyed. Good data hygiene practice to do it for everybody. Have you had any like crazy situations where someone dropped off a bunch of computers or whatever, and you found something funky in there? Like I could foresee that people are dropping stuff off to you guys, and you open up a computer like, how did this end up in here? Like a stuffed animal or something goofy like that.
Yeah, I think we found our share of insects and maybe a couple of mice, like not the computer mice kind of mice from
The
people like
four-legged
that.
version.
And we get asked when we're a full service electronics recycler, meaning we take IT equipment basically, but we'll take the occasional radio and tape deck, and but people will spread that and say, "Oh, can you take my old treadmill or something, a piece of exercise equipment?" They'll try to drop off stuff like that with us from time to time.
That's funny. We joke when we're as MSPs, we're out there fixing client issues, and the client oftentimes thinks that because we are IT people, we can fix anything that plugs into the wall. And I've literally been asked to help fix a toaster before. I'm like, what? So
Yeah.
it's funny to me that you guys get asked to well, this plugs into the wall. Can you recycle this too? Right? That's pretty funny. I would love it if you would tell us a little bit about the mission of PCs for People. Tell us a little bit about the organization because not only are you guys a cool e-waste or electronics recycler, but you also have this cool mission. And we kind of alluded to it a couple times before, but I want to give you the opportunity to kind of gush about your company a little bit because I think the mission is worthwhile.
Sure. So there's a lot of great NAID certified recyclers out there, but what makes us different is that we're a nonprofit and mission oriented organization. And just a little story. Not that long ago, we came across a first generation community college student. He was most of the way through his first year of community college, and we learned that he had been doing all of his homework and writing all of his papers on a cell phone. I mean,
Wow.
this kid was committed. Like he was not going to give up, and he just didn't have the funds for a computer. So we got him to PCs for People, and at PCs for People, what we do is distribute affordable computers and affordable internet service. And that's what all the recycling we talked about before, that is there to fuel our mission, which is to get affordable computers to low income households like that community college student.
That's fantastic. And that's one of the reasons why we partnered with you guys. Obviously, you guys made our lives easier and all the process and all of the other stuff we've already talked about. But the kind of the icing on the cake was there's something good happening out of this old hardware. It's not just getting recycled or whatever else. It's not getting recycled to the landfill. It's getting recycled to other people who actually could use it. And I think that I think that's pretty cool. And you've got offices all over the country, not in every state, but you're in quite a number of places and locales. And I will throw my direct plug here because, like I said before, we use PCs for People in my former MSP. They did a great job for us, and the mission is pretty darn cool. And so, Loren, thanks for being here, and thanks for sharing the message, and thanks for talking about data destruction and all of those things.
Well, I'm really glad to be here. We love to connect with the MSP community. We have lots of great partnerships with MSPs, and that really helps us to fuel our mission.
Awesome. Thank you so much.